So in this video, we're going to talk about lesson 5, assignment 5, and that is Oregon fish passage barriers. And we're going to try to take this extremely large collection of data sets. So we have quite a few different data files here that you're going to want to add to your ArcMap document. So I start here with the blank ArcMap document, like I did in lesson 3, and I'm just going to drag over a couple different files that you're going to want to throw in there. The nice thing is all of this data, since it's from the Oregon Geospatial Database, comes in the same projections. So it is a little goofy with it being in decimal degrees, in that the state, if you look at the counties layer, will look a little odd, but these are very, very large data sets. This NHD flow line data, I think there's 1.8 million streams in that layer. So you don't want to use that entire layer. Every time you move, it's going to redraw all 1.8 million of those streams, and it will really bog your computer down, totally bogs mine down. And then the Oregon fish passage barriers, I think there's 800,000 of those. And that's what's symbolized here on my map by these brown dots. So the goal in this assignment is to focus on one individual watershed, and that is Scappoose Creek, which is kind of up here in the northwest corner of Oregon. And so over here in my catalog tree, I've got the data that I was able to download from the Oregon Geospatial Data. I've just stored that in a desktop folder here that I'm titling Lesson 5. And so I'm just going to run you through, there's a lot in these folders, what you want to drag over here to your table of contents. So in this first one here, we have all these are geodatabases. And then within these geodatabases, you have individual feature classes. And the two I'm having you focus on here is coho salmon and winter steelhead. So this is fish habitat. So as identified by the state, this stream, it's linked right back to the stream layer, this flow line data. But what species of fish inhabit that area historically or currently? So you're going to want to drag those two over there. So coho and winter steelhead, just drag those into your virtual page. Then we're going to go back into this geodatabase here, and in here there's a bunch. So some of these you're going to want to actually grab. I have a couple here because I added these later on, but the one you're going to really want is this NHD flow line. If you want water bodies, that would be bodies of water. So if you wanted to symbolize like the Columbia River, you're going to probably have to drag that over as well. But the one you really need is flow line. That's going to contain the data that we're looking for. The rest of this information is just data about this individual collection of layers. And then these would be the fish passage barriers. So you can put in there the removed and replaced, but we're going to pick this one right here and drag that over, and that's going to give you all these brown points. The Oregon counties layer, that was just if you wanted to find the Scappoose watershed within the county. I believe it's in Columbia County, but you can have that counties layer in there. You're not really necessarily going to need it, but it may be something to help symbolize if you use two separate data frames for your final map to show where you're talking about in the state of Oregon. And then the last one here is we're looking at, these would be the individual watersheds. So we are going to use this 12th level here. So you're going to drag that guy over. And so those are the 4 that I have enabled here with the county's poly or county. I do have the county the county's line turned on. So I have 5 over in my table of contents. Immediately, once I create that, I'm going to go up here to File, Save As, and I'm going to save this as a Lesson 5 MXD file. It shouldn't be going into this folder. I'm going to put that into that Lesson 5 folder on my desktop. So within there, and there I have Lesson 5. That way, if I need to save it any other time, or I need to go do something, go to work, I can always come back and not have to add those layers individually. So first thing I'm going to do is get rid of some serious data here. And I'm going to do that by looking for the Scappoose watershed. So within this watershed table, I'm going to open the attribute table. You're going to look for something that has to do with name. And we do have this watershed here. And so you can search for it. There's a variety of ways that you can do that, but you can also just scroll and look for Scappoose Creek. So once I find Scappoose Creek, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn these layers off right now. So when I move, my computer doesn't crash on us here. So my Scappoose Creek watershed is going to be up here in this portion. So how I did that, I selected it. Once I've selected it, so you're just going to select this using the selection tool. Oh, it's in my non-selectable layers here. So let me make that selectable again. So that way, when I select it, it'll select it. So once I select it out of this watersheds layer, the next thing to make it into its own layer here, I'm just going to right click on the main layer that it's coming from, and I'm going to point up to selection, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to create layer from selected features. Now it's going to be enabled here. It's not selectable at this point, but it would be enabled, and you'd actually be able to do that. And then it's going to create a selection from that. Now, the trick about that is it might make a selection, and it looks something like this, and it's going to show up in here on the top, and it's going to be named, WBDHUD-HU12 selection. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do to that is export that. Those selections are just temporary files. And they're great, but you really can't deal with them. And since you're going to be using this to clip all of your other features to it, I would say that you want to actually create that layer. So what I did is I just stored it in this WBD, and I just called it Scappoose Creek. So here it is, my Scappoose Creek watershed boundary. All right. So now once you've got your Scappoose Creek watershed boundary, this is going to be basically your cookie cutter. And I'm going to use this to clip all of these other features to that. So for example, these Oregon fish passage barriers, right? I don't want all these Oregon fish passage barriers. I only want the ones within the Scappoose Creek watershed boundary. So I'm going to point up here to geoprocessing and clip. And in my clip, my input feature is if you read over here, it's going to give you a little bit of a description for that. Your input feature is, what do you want to clip? Well, I want to clip this Oregon fish passage barrier. So I'm going to select that one, Oregon fish passage barriers. And it might take a moment here. And then my clip feature is always going to be my cookie cutter. So what do I want to clip with? Well, in this situation, that's going to be the Scappoose Creek watershed boundary. All right, so I'm going to pick that from this drop down, Scappoose Creek. I think I called it Scappoose Creek watershed. Okay. Now this is going to be where your data is going to end up, and the default is that it's going to go to the default geo database within some ArcGIS folder buried somewhere on your hard drive. nightmare of a location. You're never going to probably find it. I want to actually put this back into, since I'm going to be clipping these Oregon fish passage barriers, I want to put it back into this Oregon fish passage barrier folder. So you're going to need to navigate to that. If you note here, it's going in the wrong location. So I'm going to click on my little folder. I'm going to go back in here to my desktop, wherever I have that lesson 5 data. And then I have my Oregon fish passage barriers, which are going to be in this folder, in this geodatabase. And then I'm going to just name these something like Scappoose Creek fish passage barriers. And I'm going to save that. And once you save that, you're going to go ahead and hit click OK. And your geoprocessing tool is going to run down here, clip, 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 clip. And then it's going to yield a result. Now, this is different than what you saw with the selection create layer from selected features, in that you had then had to export that as a feature class. When you're running geoprocessing, that clip tool is actually going to clip and generate a feature class. And so now when I turn off those fish passage barriers, I have the fish passage barriers within my Scappoose Creek watershed boundary. You're going to want to do that to these streams as well, so that when I'm not going to draw all of these, but when all these streams show up, you want to just have the streams within the Oregon or within the Scappoose Creek watershed. And then I also, so that's pretty good. Like, that's now when you move around on your map, things are going to be a lot easier to deal with, and it's not going to crash your computer, so to speak. Now I'm asking you for just a couple streams. So just Scappoose Creek and McNulty Creek. And so McNulty Creek also has a North Fork on it. So you're going to want to select that as well. And what I'm looking for there is just you can do this a couple of different ways, through a select by location, or you can just select it. But the end result is you're going to get rid of all of that data that's inside of there, and you're just going to end up with Scappoose Creek and McNulty Creek. Scappoose Creek being the one here on the kind of the south side of the watershed, and McNulty Creek being on the top, with the North Fork being up here on the top. So those are the two watershed, or two streams that we want within the watershed. And I'm looking specifically at the fish passage barriers within those two streams. So we're going to get rid of these other fish passage barriers and have just the fish passage barriers that are along those two stream reaches. And those are the questions that I'll be looking for you to answer. There's some other questions along the way. And then, of course, I want you to make a map at this level. Now, this map, is not terribly great at this point, because I probably want to symbolize these streams a little bit better, maybe the watershed boundary a little bit differently. And there might be some things that you could add here in the background, especially if you go into Dogami, you get some LiDAR layer for the background. That might be a really nice way to add to the back of this watershed, because it's not a terribly large watershed as watersheds go. So hopefully that helps you through the process of using selection tools to eliminate a tremendous amount of data down to just two stream reaches. I think within these two stream reaches, there were like 39 segments or something along those lines. And when you create a layer from those selected features within the streams layer here, within the flow line, there's two different types, I think, that they're symbolized by. I think one's an artificial path. Most of this is an artificial path. And then some of it down here on the bottom is a stream river. McNulty Creek is 100% symbolized by stream river and so forth. The last thing you're going to do is you're going to add these steelhead, winter steelhead, and the coho salmon. Now, just note that there are some misalignment issues here. Those are things that we can fix in the future. We don't need to worry about that today. But you also need to note that if you have this Scappoose and McNulty Creek sitting on top of that layer, those are going to be symbolized slightly differently. So just be aware of where, what fish species are utilizing those two streams, and then symbolize that appropriately. So hopefully this helps out. And if you have any questions, definitely stop by office hours and I'll help you through the process.